A reading from the letter of St. James. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister has nothing to wear and has no food for the day, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace, keep warm and eat well," but you do not give them the necessities of the body, what good is it? So also faith of itself, if it does not have works, is dead. Indeed, someone might say, "You have faith, and I have works. Demonstrate your faith to me without works, and I will demonstrate my faith to you from my works." The word of the Lord. In Jane Austen's novel, Pride and Prejudice, there is a character, Mr. Collins, who's a relative of the Bennet family, the main characters of the novel. And Mr. Collins comes to visit his family at one point in the novel, and almost as soon as he arrives, he begins to brag about his sophistication, his social skills, his connections in the world. But as time goes on and the family gets to know him a little better, they start to realize just how unsophisticated and awkward he is. Probably the most Mr. Collins moment that Mr. Collins has is when he proposes marriage to one of the Bennet sisters. He's come seeking a bride. He's fixed his eye on Elizabeth Bennet, the main character, and once he's gotten her alone, he proposes to her. She doesn't take to it well. And as he continues to profess his undying love for her, how he could never live with any other woman, she continues to say no, until finally she leaves the room and he's left alone. Then in the novel, we don't hear from Mr. Collins for a while, until a few days later, when we find out that he's now engaged to Elizabeth's best friend, Charlotte. Some undying love that was. Only a couple days later, he's engaged to someone else. Mr. Collins is someone who says one thing, but he does another. His words and his deeds don't match up. I'm sure we've all known a Mr. Collins in our life. Maybe we've been Mr. Collins at one point, where we've professed to be one thing, but then we do something different. And I'm not talking about where we fall short. For example, I want to be more honest, but I continue to lie. No, a Mr. Collins is someone who can absolutely firmly believe that they are truthful as they lie. I think we have an example of a Mr. Collins in this reading. James writes that if a brother or sister has nothing to wear and has no food for the day, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace, keep warm, eat well," but you do not give them the necessities of the body, what good is it? Here we have a Christian, a believer, who I think we can assume would agree with Jesus that it is good to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked. But then when they get a living and breathing person in front of them who is hungry and in need of clothing, they say, "Take care, good luck, I will see you later." There's a total disconnect between the words, the beliefs, and the actions. It reminds me of a line from Pope Francis's recent exhortation on holiness, Gaudete et Exsultate. In the document, Francis talks about two ancient heresies that he sees as threatening the church again in this day. And he refers to contemporary Gnostics who think of the intellect as separate from the flesh and thus become incapable of touching Christ's suffering flesh in others. Think about this story from James again, of not noticing the needs of a brother or sister. These modern-day Gnostics become incapable of touching Christ's suffering flesh in another because they've separated the intellect from the flesh. The Gnostic has, we might say, an intellectual faith. It's a faith that remains in their head, and it comforts them, makes them feel better. I'm saved, I believe, but it's never able to challenge them. Their faith is never able to move from their head to their heart and influence their actions. So I might wonder, where is my faith? Is my faith in my head? or is it in my heart? Now, our brother, St. Thomas Aquinas, talks about faith as a perfection of the intellect, and rightly so. So we might be tempted to think that, yes, faith is a matter of the head. The heart is for some other virtue. But then Thomas makes a very interesting distinction based on this reading between what he calls lifeless faith and living faith. Now, in the Latin, lifeless faith he calls fides informis. Informis, lacking a form, without a form. Or living faith, on the other hand, is fides formata. It's faith that is formed, faith that has a form. And the form of faith, Thomas says, the form of the virtue is charity. That divine love that's infused into us by grace, that moves our faith from our head to our heart, so that faith is no longer just something we think about, it's no longer just something we say, but it becomes what we do. Lifeless faith, this fides informis, is the faith of a Mr. Collins, or a Gnostic. It's a faith that's comforting, but doesn't have much to say in the way of action. On the other hand, living faith, fides formata, is the faith of the saints. It's a faith whose works, whose deeds are equal to the words that it professes. It's a faith that's able to test itself against the truth revealed by God and find where it still falls short, find where it can still grow. The difference is the same as the difference between merely knowing what is good and doing what is good. And of course, we know the greatest example of this is our Lord Jesus Christ, who not only taught us what it is to love, but then showed us what it is to love in his life and in his sacrifice on the cross. So, brothers, I ask myself, how well do my actions align with my words, with my beliefs? Does my faith bring forth the works that James says it must? Does it remain in my head, where it comforts me, but cannot offer me any way to life? Am I a Mr. Collins? Am I a Gnostic? Or am I a Christian who's challenged by the Word in order that I might die to myself and have living faith in God?